Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, maybe for some of you in other parts of the world. We're here today to talk about our, how we phrase it, unconventional career paths in the world of Salesforce. When we started out, we never thought, okay, we're going to follow this linear journey. We just kind of landed into this world of Salesforce and have kind of gone in different directions. So, without further ado, I'm just going to start with this presentation. Just want to thank you all for joining. Obviously, lines are muted, but please contribute in the comments. We'll have opportunities for you to, sorry.
We'll do a Q&A at the end, and we'll also keep an eye on your questions throughout.
I'm sorry, I'm suffering from a bit of a cough.
That's right, Luce.
They say there's a British saying like a frog in the throat. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, if you're from the UK, you probably will say to people, oh, it's a frog in the throat, but that's just completely random. Obviously, Alyssa sounds American. She grew up in America, but she's been living in the UK for 9 years, is it?
9.5 years now, exactly.
Exactly. Oh, okay, I think I'm ready to continue. So I'm Lucy Mazalon. I'm the operations director at Salesforce Ben. Basically, it just means that I glue everything together in our company. Salesforce Ben is a media site. It started off as a blog, which some of you probably are familiar with because you clicked on this event to register. But since then, we've grown into multiple different services, catering to all the different Salesforce roles. Previously, actually, you're going to hear about that in a bit. So I'm not going to talk about my previous experience. You go through it, Alyssa.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name's Alyssa Lefebvre, and I'm currently the RevOps Systems owner at Aareon. And again, you'll hear about all my past experience as well on this call. But what that means is that I head up all of our systems that are to do with revenue operations. So we have more than just Salesforce. We have Salesforce, HubSpot, Zendesk, Certinia soon. We're going to go live with that in the summer. So it's really an exciting role for me that it's sort of a little bit outside of Salesforce, but definitely heavily focused on Salesforce as that's our main tool for sales.
First time I heard about Certinia.
Yes, well, it's going live in the summer. We're still in the project at the moment. They're in UAT.
Full of surprises, Alyssa.
Yes, I know. My team has grown this year, which has been very exciting.
Well, thank you for joining and taking out the time to, discuss all of these things with us. So to begin with, I thought I'd discuss, what we mean when we're talking through different definitions. We will use some acronyms through this presentation. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we all understand what that is. Then I'll go into my career path. Again, I started out when I had just turned 21, and that was 10 years ago. It's been a crazy ride. Then Alyssa will go into also her career path, bearing in mind we started in the same job, in the same place at the same time, and how different that is. And then looking at a typical Salesforce role where we should be adding value, and then a spotlight on RevOps as well. And of course, any questions you've got, put them in the chat. So what's your Salesforce career been like? Just let us know in the comments. Like us, you may have landed in a job in the Salesforce world and then ended up completely somewhere different to what you thought. Right, so like I mentioned, apologies if this is very familiar to anybody, but when you work in the Salesforce ecosystem, you'll come across multiple acronyms. ISVs are companies that develop apps to enhance Salesforce. SIs are companies that work to adjust the product to the company. So ISVs plug-in and play apps or plug-in apps. SEOs like mold the platform for a particular company, for their needs, and then end users are companies that are customers of Salesforce. All right. So for me, I started, sorry. I started my career in 2014. I got called up, I don't want to say randomly, but I was what's called an alliances coordinator. This meant working for this ISV at the time. Apttus was the largest Salesforce ISV in the ecosystem. So then I was brought into understanding, okay, what is Salesforce as a company? We're not talking about the technology, we're talking about as Salesforce Inc., how they have built their partner ecosystem, all of that things, and the importance of partnerships with sharing leads, like what's the expectation for one to another. Then I moved on to being a SDR. So that's a sales development rep. I didn't want to, elaborate that title. I think everybody on this call probably know what that involves. It involves cold calling. It also involves, building your own pipeline, writing SOW, sealing the deal end to end. But I felt in this role, I was really in the deep end. But I was up for the challenge, and being responsible for your own pipeline, you have a target. I took what I knew about how to work with people from Salesforce, what these Salesforce AEs, as in account execs, were interested in. We're all motivated by our personal interests. And so it was fast paced, but I felt it was really good because it wasn't just like I'm going to sell you, it's not, like I'm going to sell you 10 of this. It's like we were selling to Salesforce customers looking to implement Salesforce. So it was more of a consultative sale, which was really good for me to flex my muscles. So yeah, I matched up the technical with emotional intelligence at that point. In the same year, you might accuse me of job hopping, but I got offered a job in Poland, of all places. So I really wanted to move into delivery, and this consultancy in Poland offered me a role. And the next slide, you'll see that I only got Pardot certified just before that, but I really loved the platform. So I had an opportunity to work in Poland and Belgium, and I was encouraged then to learn both Pardot and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Don't recommend it. It's too much to know and learn to be an expert in both. But anyway, I was glad I was given that kind of push to learn both of them. Then I went freelance, all of the juggling clients, and when you go freelance, there's a whole lot of accounting. But that time in my life, it actually worked for me. Then I got a contract role. I was still technically freelance, but I landed a role with a large coming down with the sniffles, enterprise company. And within that, I was very thankful for all of that kind of foundation that I'd built previously. Just because I was just, even though I was a Pardot consultant, I was being pulled in like, oh, can you do this? Can you do this favor? And on contract, it's fine because you're getting paid by the day. And now 2020 onwards, although I've been working part-time, building up salesforceben.com since 2015. There came a point early 2020 when Ben goes, one of us has to go full time. So I said, fine, I'll do it. You know, at that point, I'd been in consulting for quite a while, and I, really love writing content. I'm utilizing my technology skills as well as soft skills. Every day is a new challenge, but with all the interviews and having to not sell myself, but sell my skills has really helped in me being able to interview really effectively. So it's all come together in a bit of a strange way, but yeah, I think that's all I have to say here. But if you look at where my thoughts were heading, so I didn't get certified as an admin, a Salesforce admin, until 2016. And the grayed out ones are ones that I studied for and failed, but it shows my intention, right? So I was like, okay, right, I'm going to do admin, platform app builder, service cloud, sales cloud. Didn't pass sales cloud. But then look, I found Pardot, marketing cloud, account engagement, formerly Pardot. And then, I moved into the marketing sphere. And as Salesforce have released more certs, I then took more. Personally, my favorite is the business analyst. So yeah, that just shows you a little bit of where my thoughts were going in terms of my career path. And now I will pass over to Alyssa.
Thanks, Lucy. So, I'll go through my career journey as well. And I think it's really interesting to have seen this, like Lucy said, where we both started out in the same role at the same time. Lucy started about 3 months before me. I actually met Lucy the day after I moved to the UK. So I arrived in the UK, got to the flat that I had never seen, put my bags down, unpacked a little bit. And then the next day I went to Windsor to meet the Apttus team because, again, had never met any of them. I had gotten the job completely over the phone, not even over video call. So I'd never seen a single person that worked for Apttus. Didn't really know a lot about Salesforce. Wasn't sure if this was a total scam, but thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I have family that live in the UK, so I thought, worst comes to worst, I can fall back and stay in their spare bedroom. So I joined Apttus as well in January 2015 as an alliances coordinator. So again, same as Lucy, my first intro to the Salesforce ecosystem. Was really interesting to understand how Salesforce works with both SIs and ISVs. And then again, understand the importance of partnerships. Once I had gotten sort of involved in the alliances coordinator role, I moved into a little bit more of an operations role within the same team, working for the same person when she got promoted. So I got more involved with the system. I got more involved in the back end of Salesforce, and I got really interested to learn how we could configure it at Apttus to make it work for our partner team. And then, of course, that leads down the whole rabbit hole of configuration. What can you do for customers? And that led me to joining the business analyst team, joining as a business analyst team to the professional services team at Apttus as well. So that was really fun. It was my introduction to professional services. So I should have mentioned as well, prior to working in Salesforce, I had done about a year's work in an operations role in an office in Texas where I used to live. And then before that, I worked solely in retail. So totally different career move to move into technology. My education for my degree was in business administration. So again, not technology focused at all. I think Lucy didn't mention it, but her degree also wasn't technology focused, which I think is a really good thing for people to see, because you don't have to do an IT degree. You don't have to do something tech focused or, developing coding to get into Salesforce. It's really accessible to anyone who's willing to learn, just like Lucy and I were. So as I moved into my business analyst role, there was lots of traveling involved. And a lot of you may not have had that in your career if you started out sort of just before COVID. But consulting and professional services, there's a lot of travel involved. So just keep that in mind if you join that area. It can be great when you're in your 20s, like I was. Now at this point in my life, I don't want to travel. I want to stay home. I love my home. And I don't want to be in a hotel and living out of a suitcase. But that's obviously totally dependent on your own situation.
That is interesting though, Alyssa. I always find it's an irony, right? When you're in your 20s, you're not the one to be sent traveling.
Yes.
But then when you're in your 30s and you're settling down, it's,
Yeah.
you're not, as you're not you are the person to be sent. And you're like,
Yeah.
maybe that's
Yeah.
not for me, right?
I know. It's so
very
funny. And
Yeah.
to anyone who has visions of work travel being so glamorous, and, I thought I was going to be wearing heels every day at the airport, like looking like $1,000,000. That's not the case. Leggings, tent trainer, all the way. And you just sort of transition into this like work travel mode, and you learn how to live out of a suitcase. You learn how to pack super light. So I definitely have gained lots of skills from it. I can move through the airport at pace now, but I don't want to do it all the time anymore, for sure.
Penelope just said her degree was in fine arts and has served her well.
Yeah, that is so interesting, Penelope. Yeah, thanks for commenting about that, because literally any degree can be used in Salesforce. And again, it's just if you're willing to learn. So moving into my business analyst role at Acumen. So I also can be accused of job hopping. I don't think personally there's anything wrong with it. My mom, and I know Lucy's dad, used to comment on it sometimes for both of us, because they come from a totally different generation where you joined a company and you stayed there forever, and they really looked after you. Not to say companies don't look after you anymore, but you obviously need to look after yourself as well. So every career move I made was definitely for either, an increase in salary, for sure. Let's not beat around the bush. We all work for money, or, a good change into a different role for me to learn, which would then obviously set me up for success in the future. So I left Apttus early 2017 to join Acumen. It was my real intro into Salesforce CPQ. So Apttus is a CPQ, or sorry, Apttus no longer exists. It's now called Conga, which you all are probably familiar with if you're in the ecosystem. But Apttus was a big CPQ and CLM, so contract lifecycle management and configure price quote vendor. So my experience then moving into Salesforce CPQ was very relevant from that perspective. So it was my real intro into Salesforce CPQ. I even got sent to Stockholm to do a Salesforce CPQ training for a week, which was great. I did realize I didn't enjoy consulting. So I loved working in professional services for a product company. Moving into consulting personally wasn't for me. It absolutely can be for other people. I didn't love it. So I got two certifications, which you'll see on the next slide. And I actually went back. I boomeranged back to Apttus after 11 months to go back as a senior business analyst. I definitely had less imposter syndrome at this point. So I think, we all have maybe suffered from imposter syndrome at one point or another. And I think, as you can see, like in the first sort of 2 to 3 years of me building my skills, I definitely suffered from imposter syndrome at times, because I was thrown into situations I did not understand, never been in before. I'm literally sat there with people from all sorts of huge companies, like global, well-known name brands. And I'm like, why am I here? I mean, I was like, 20, 25, 26. Sometimes you just think, what am I actually doing here? But then when I went back as a senior business analyst, I definitely had less of that imposter syndrome, because I felt like I'd been doing the role for a little while now. And I felt a little bit more confident in that role. I was brought in a lot to sort of come into projects almost as like a SWAT team, they used to say sometimes. So I would be brought in when a project maybe wasn't going as well as it could, to sort of help restore a little bit of balance, a little bit of goodwill. I think there's a misconception that in professional services, you just need to be technical. There's definitely an element of needing that soft skill. You need to be able to work with people, engage stakeholders. have that personable sort of personality traits where you're a little bit bubbly. You guys can probably tell I love to talk. My mom said I could win an Olympic medal if that was if it was an Olympic sport. So you sort of need that person sometimes, especially in professional services. So I used to be brought into these customers. I've been to Technogym's office in Italy. It was incredible. I've been to ABB's office. So, I've been to some really cool places to work with these clients and get their projects back on track. I learned a ton in that role, and then that transitioned me into moving into the sales tech team at UiPath. So that was my first end user role. So I think I missed out to say that I was with ISVs mostly, as well as the short stint with the SI, but then I moved into an end user role at UiPath. UiPath is a robotic process automation company, and I was working as part of their Salesforce team or their sales tech team, but working pretty much solely with Salesforce CPQ. It was my first time at an end user. I loved it. I had such an amazing team. I actually just went out to Romania again to see them literally like 3 weeks ago. So I'm still really close with them. And more traveling. Again, I was traveling pretty much like every 6 weeks, I think that year, Lucy, if you remember. I was literally just like in and out all the time, like you were when you were working in Poland and Belgium.
Yeah.
So definitely more focused on Salesforce CPQ at UiPath. So I got a really, really good understanding of Salesforce CPQ. And that's where I really had my specialization. So I know Lucy talked about her sort of work with Pardot and Marketing Cloud. And I had the same thing, but I specialized in CPQ. And I had an amazing team. I then transitioned into being a sales engineer, which you might think is a totally random role. But I was at Clary, who's sort of an ISV. I would say I used to call them Salesforce adjacent because they're not actually listed on the App Exchange, but they only work with Salesforce customers. So they're sort of like an ISV, but they basically plug into your Salesforce data, and they have a revenue operations platform that then works with your Salesforce data on the Clary side and provides like really comprehensive reports and dashboards and stuff, more so than you can get out of Salesforce. They also do timestamping, which is a big one for Salesforce. So it was a totally different role for me. They were looking for someone with a lot of Salesforce experience to come in and be a sales engineer for them. So using my soft skills, using my what I learned about presenting and working with clients. So I was doing, a pre-sales role, customer facing, like selling role. It wasn't customer facing on the post-sales side. It was pre-sales. So it was totally different from what I'd been doing before, but I absolutely loved it. I had so much fun. I went to some sales engineering awards, dinners and stuff like that. Even it was so much fun. I actually closed 11 out of the 16 deals in my segment in my first year, or my only year at Clary, because I was only there for a year, before I transitioned and actually became the head of the job I'm in now, so the head of revenue operations systems at Aareon. And sometimes, guys, in your career, there are going to be roles that you simply cannot pass up. And my job that I have now was one of those roles. It was a complete greenfield Salesforce implementation for an enterprise company, which I don't want to say it's rare these days, but there's not that many enterprise companies that haven't bought Salesforce. So it was totally new. We were transitioning over from a legacy system at Aareon. And so I felt like it was a role that I couldn't say no to, and I would regret it in the future if I did. It was my first real leadership position. So I now have a team. I started out with 3 people on my team when I first joined. I now have 5, and we're potentially going to have more this year. So I'm learning to delegate. I'm doing less configuration from a day-to-day perspective in terms of sort of more basic admin stuff, but I'm really focused on solutioning for larger projects. So when we need to overhaul a process within the system, that's where I really come in. And otherwise, I'm just managing what's going on with all of our other systems that we're using. So that is my career journey. Lucy, if you want to jump to the next slide, I can talk through some of my certifications as well.
I just wanted to say that's really interesting. You said you couldn't pass up that role, even when you were in a sales role and you were doing well. You just thought, I've got to sink my teeth into something new.
Yeah.
Looking beyond not just Clary, right?
Yeah.
But looking to get your teeth into something that you carry through.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was the only job in my entire sort of career progression where I hounded the recruiter because I wanted the job so bad. He answered me the next day and he was like, "Oh," it was like a couple of days after I'd messaged him on LinkedIn, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, I was off sick." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." But that's how much I really wanted this job. And it's worked out really well since then. You know, it's funny when you're job hopping. I think when you're in your 20s and early 30s, you're really looking for all that experience. Like Lucy, you were saying, like you soaked up so much experience, and I did the same thing. And I think now I'm actually putting all of that into practice in a place where I can grow from a long-term perspective, because you do have to sort of find your feet at some point, I think, in your career. And I personally have found that in this role now, which is really exciting. So
sorry, Alyssa, I
that's
just
okay.
want to pause there and just say, you know, like, sure, we were lucky, I suppose, to get that original position, but it's
Yeah.
not like we haven't spent evenings, weekends,
Oh my
just
God.
thinking about
Yeah.
what we want to do next.
Yeah.
I paid for my certs myself.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
there have been sacrifices along the way. I don't want to make it sound like we're privileged or anything. Yes, of course, we were lucky to get that first job.
Yeah.
You know, if we hadn't thought outside of the box and like made our skills transferable, then we
100%.
wouldn't have, you know, gone to the next stages. So
100%. And I think as well, the certs that we both have shown on the same slides, it just shows how much dedication we had over a long period of time, because you can't get these certifications without spending hours and hours studying and working towards it. And actually not just studying the theory, but working in the system to understand it. So I remember when Trailhead launched. I don't know if you remember, Lucy, but we went to a user group at,
I
was it
do.
Missoula, I think? And that was the first time we ever used Trailhead, I think. That was back in 2015, I think, when it
2016,
launched.
2016.
2016. No, no, because I got my certification in February 2016. So it must have been 2015. Yeah. So crazy, I know.
Anyway,
So
almost
anyway, so yeah, so I think it just shows, right? And I tried, for example, in 2017, I tried to do the CPQ certification just with theory, because I'd gone to the training in Stockholm. I'd done the theory, but I hadn't worked with the tool that much. I hadn't actually implemented it for any customers yet. I tried to do the CPQ certification and I failed miserably. And I don't like failing exams. It's not something that I used to do in school or anything like that. I don't enjoy it, but it was so hard. I couldn't believe how difficult it was. When I took it again in 2019 at Dreamforce, highly recommend taking certifications at Dreamforce. It's like, I don't know, it's got like a different vibe to it, I think, but highly recommend it if you're at Dreamforce, take the certifications there. I did it at Dreamforce after having worked with it at UiPath for an extensive period of time at that point. I found it so much easier. There was still a couple questions that threw me because, you know, we didn't use, for example, the templates that CPQ uses. We used Conga. So a few things like that where I wasn't 100% sure, but the core CPQ functionality I found much easier. I also loved the business analyst one, Lucy, because I think that was my
that's my
highest ever
favorite.
scored exam. So I loved it.
Mhm.
And then as even when I was at Clary, I was still, you know, building up my Salesforce skill set, even though it was sort of, you know, outside of my work at that time. But I was still, you know, keeping one foot dipped in the Salesforce ecosystem. And then last year I did the sharing and visibility architect and then data architect one. And I have one left to get application architect, but I've been putting it off. So if you guys in the comments have done platform developer one, please give me some motivation to start working on it, because that's the last certification I want to do for the time being. I'll have 10. I'll be an application architect. And that's where I sort of, you know, I think I'll be happy at that point. And then we'll see where things go after that. So yeah, if you have any advice in the comments, please let me know for platform developer one.
I know that is quite a tricky one.
I
There's a couple
have heard,
people,
yeah.
yeah, there's a couple of people on our team that, you know, one passed it straight away, then the other
Yeah.
one took several attempts, but
Yeah.
then, you know, is now like fully, what's the word for it? Making courses about it.
Yeah. Amazing,
It's
amazing.
sometimes it's not about passing first time, like I
Yeah,
feel there's no harm, there's
yeah.
no shame.
Oh gosh, no,
Really.
no.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
failed the advanced admin and still never retook it.
Yeah, I failed Sales Cloud and Data Cloud.
Yeah,
Apologies, I was coughing earlier.
no
I didn't
worries.
finish my narrative about Data Cloud, but yeah, it's all about like looking at, okay, what's coming up, where can I be useful, things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But also just a bit of, and obviously we have not put all of the trailhead badges that we have
Oh
or
gosh, yeah,
anything like that. But even that would indicate some sort of like, oh, I'm just going to explore this, right? Rather than
yeah,
committing studying for a cert. But
yeah,
back in the day,
absolutely.
we were just, directing ourselves in this way.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think the super badges now have become even more not, like, more coveted, but they are it almost, like, demonstrates your skills from a practical perspective because I knew a lot of people that took the admin exam for example, and I'd be in a training course with them, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm a Salesforce certified admin," but then they wouldn't know the first thing about how to actually configure the system because they'd just done the theory part of it. So I think now, and I think this is also something that I get asked a lot about, oh, do you recommend doing a lot of certifications or do you recommend, having experience? And I think it has to be a combination of both. I think certifications sometimes are a little bit of a, we pat ourselves on the back. Everyone likes to celebrate, getting a certification. But that's why I've made a point to myself that once I get my application architect, sort of badge, that's going to be sort of not it for me forever, but just for the time being, because I want to focus on other skill sets. I want to focus on doing training for soft skills, for, working with my team as a leader and things like that. So I'm not focusing so much on the hard skills that I don't necessarily use on a day-to-day basis anymore. And so I think it's really important that you don't just do certifications for the sake of it. Sometimes you have to if you work for an SI because they need certifications to keep their ranking within Salesforce as a partner. But I think there has to be a balance between certifications and your experience.
oh, totally. The big debate. Um,
Yeah,
I've even written blog posts about it,
yeah,
like, certifications versus experience, which one wins?
yeah,
And at
yeah,
the end of the day, it is experience.
yeah,
And that's then a chicken and egg situation. Like, how do I get experience without certs? Blah blah blah.
yeah,
I think it's all just about what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like just being very aware of the situation, the business that you're in,
yeah,
asking questions. I know it
yeah,
sounds cliche, but it's true.
yeah,
And Alyssa, David said, thank you for sharing your story. Um, he finds it really encouraging to hear because he can relate. He's working on his first Salesforce certification after a decade in retail.
oh,
Um,
nice.
does the imposter syndrome ever go away?
So I don't think the imposter syndrome ever fully goes away. I think you just get new imposter syndrome, if that makes sense. So,
Mm.
as I started working with Salesforce more, I became more confident in actually configuring the system and, building solutions for things. I have less imposter syndrome from that perspective. Definitely have more imposter syndrome now from a leadership perspective. So, I'm really trying to, read books on leadership, try to be the best leader I can be for my team. I'm quite a young leader as well in my company. So, I work with people who are both younger than me and older than me, which is an interesting dynamic. So I have to, figure out how that's going to work as well. Um, so I would say career in retail, like when you work in retail, you work with people face to face and you learn so many soft skills. And that you can actually carry into all your Salesforce roles. I worked in retail for 7 years, so I totally feel you, David. And I definitely think I use skill sets. I couldn't like pinpoint certain things, but I think I definitely have skills that I've built from my time in retail going into Salesforce. And I would say as well, I know retail isn't necessarily selling, but you understand customers, you understand the dynamics of deals potentially. It depends on what area of retail you are working in. But I think something I wanted to say as well, Lucy, was just in general, every job that either both you and I have done has given us a different set of skills, right? Like it's funny that we both went into sales at different times in our careers, but that going into sales, for example, gives you so many skills that you can take into other roles as well. So I think it's interesting. And I just wanted to say on the call that if you are offered a role that you're not sure about, or you think maybe it's going away from, what your initial career path was, don't discount it. If you think the company's great, if you think the boss will be great, if you know people on the team already, something like that, you're being referred in, don't be afraid to take a step that might feel like you're moving away from your career path, because it could end up being a really amazing opportunity for you. It could give you a ton of new skills that you didn't expect to get. And you can always go back. Like I've come back into the Salesforce ecosystem directly as, working for an end user, but now I can present better because I have better presentation skills. I can speak to a group of people and I'm more confident because I had to speak and do these presentations as a sales engineer to very high level people, which is so nerve wracking. That's something I don't miss about being a sales engineer. I'll be totally honest, is the like sweating before a call because I was so nervous that the demo was going to go wrong or something like that. So yeah, don't miss that, but love the skills that I gained from it.
Yeah, I agree. Going back again, sorry, I had to rush through my slide because I was coughing so much.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, it's like I was, I guess, privileged because I could take a pay cut, but I took pay cuts because I saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was only in my third role. So from then I just went down, down, down in the pay scale because I
Yeah.
was seeing like, okay, my skills fit here, but I don't have the experience. So I'm just going to jump in. Again,
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to not have dependents,
Yeah.
so that I could do that. But all the same, I agree with you, Alyssa. It's like sometimes things can scare you, but it's just jumping in. I unfortunately, in one of my roles, I was often dismissed. Why are you sending this young girl to our office? And
Yeah.
I, was, multi-certified, had done a great proposal, prepared a great demo, custom demo for this customer. And they said, why are you sending this little girl to our office? So yeah, it's oftentimes that you can get knocked down.
Yeah.
It's just about like going, no, actually, you wait, you listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not being afraid to have that confidence and to say
Mhm.
that, especially when you have the knowledge. It can be harder, I think, when you have a little bit of imposter syndrome, but
Of
yeah,
course. But
having the
I
confidence to say, "Actually, I know what I'm talking about," because it's happened to me as well. I think, unfortunately, because we're both women, it does happen a lot more often. We tend to be sometimes the only woman in the room, in tech, but I think that's changing. I'm leading for example, the women in tech group at Aareon, and everyone's super enthusiastic about it. And I'm trying to, do the same thing as on this call, is just sort of inspire them in terms of, what you can do in tech. There's not just one role that people can do. There's so many different roles that you can take. You can be a more technical person or solution architect or whatever the case may be. But there's no limit to, as long as you're curious and you want to learn, there's really no limit to what you can do.
Interesting question, Alyssa. I
Yeah.
think you might have a few thoughts about this one. When you started at Apttus,
Yep.
right, back to 2015, um, did you envision being where you are now?
No,
No.
definitely not. I don't think either of us did, Luce. We were just having a great time. We were just going to Salesforce events, learning, like you said, learning the ecosystem. I don't think either of us could have envisioned where we've ended up in our careers and where we've gone along the way as well.
Mhm.
And I think that's normal and really exciting for a lot of people as well. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to have a specific end goal in mind sometimes, because it can limit you from taking certain opportunities. Different thing if you're saying, I want to be a certified technical architect. That's totally different. That's a really, really good goal to reach, obviously, in the Salesforce ecosystem. And you can get there by doing, you'll have to sort of be in those technical roles. But I think in general, there's so many other sort of different roles that you can do: sales engineering, working in professional services, working for an SI, working for an end user. There's so many different avenues you can take. So I just think it's good to sort of keep your options open.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we appreciate the job market's hard at the moment, but it's about, sometimes, do take risks. Obviously, we appreciate we're talking from a different period in time.
Yeah.
We totally understand that. We're just trying to say where we started out is, completely different from where we ended up.
Yeah.
That's all
Exactly.
the take-home message.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, let me just mute myself.
No worries, Luce. I'll just take this one for a second. Are you okay?
No, all good. Right, so the way I see it, a typical Salesforce role goes operational, technical, and strategic. Operational, just the stuff you need to do day to day to keep the system running.
Yeah.
As you move up into management, you do less and less of this, but sometimes you can get sucked into doing operational things like data quality, things like that. Technical is more configuration and integrations, things like that. Strategic, I hate the word strategic. It grinds, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me, like, because it's misused, overused. What this means is that you're actually taking a step back and thinking, if operational is the doing, technical is also the doing, then do the doing. Strategic is the thinking.
Yes. And I think strategic is really that mix between, actually, it's funny because like a solution architect, I would say, is that real mix between the strategic, the technical, and the operational, because you have to really look at a process end to end, think about how it's going to work from both the technical perspective, so with any other systems that you have to work with, then from the operational perspective, how are my users actually going to interact with this process, and then put all of that into place. And not to say it's just SAs that do that, but just that is a role that I've done in the past, or been sort of not officially a solution architect, but have done that sort of role. And that is really sort of encompassing all three. And as you work into, you move into business analyst roles or other type of delivery roles, you see this a lot as well. And then from the end user side, like where I am now, again, I'm doing very much all three of these things, because I have to think about, how are my users going to use this? How is it going to work with our other systems, our ERP, our marketing system? And then, how is this going to work long term? Is it scalable as we bring in more business units? Is it scalable as we onboard more users and get more complex? So this is very much a typical Salesforce role.
Absolutely, I agree. It's about balancing all those three, really.
Yeah.
But where do you focus your attention? So realistically, it's the strategic part.
Yeah.
This is the part that eventually, with AI advancing quite fast,
Yeah.
operational, technical can somewhat be automated or taken over.
Yeah.
UiPath with the robots,
I think it's actually funny that you say that, because, I think UiPath was a great example, but we had robots working in Salesforce to do things that end users didn't need to do, or made life easier for end users, rather than doing any sort of actual technical development. And I think some people probably have seen the memes on LinkedIn and stuff, but I think until people can very clearly articulate exactly what they want, there's always going to be a need for that human interaction, at least within the Salesforce ecosystem, because I've worked with plenty of end customers, and I do it even today. People will submit a ticket for, a case. We use cases to track all of our improvement requests for Salesforce, and they'll put through a case, and it will be, oh, can I have this field on this object. And I'm like, okay, guys, what do you want to do with that field? And then it turns out that it's actually not a field. It's a custom object with a related object and a junction object, because we need to be able to have flexibility in the values that they're pulling through. So it's not so much about AI taking over. I think it's going to be about people being able to do really good discovery with their clients, and AI can then take whatever they've discovered and, processed and said, okay, now this is what I want to build. AI can then take it. I can't wait for the day that AI can build flows for me based on whatever I tell it to do. But I think I'm still going to always have to speak to my end customers and my end users, because I need to know exactly what it is that they want to do, because they don't always know what exactly it is that they want to do with something in the future, or how they want it to scale. They just have a vision. Oh, I want to use a multi-select pick list. And I'm like, no, you don't. Trust me, you don't. So it's things like that.
Don't bring that topic up, Alyssa.
That's a whole other call that we can have. But yes, I think you're right. Strategic is really where people can add value, especially when they get to a certain level in their career. Because obviously when you start out and you're an admin or you're a junior developer and you're just learning the system and the platform, you're going to be providing that technical or that operational value. But as you progress in your career, you are going to become that more strategic person that people go to figure out how the Salesforce and other systems as well are going to work together to actually deliver value to the end user. Because that's the most important thing, right? The end users need to have value from the systems.
I mean, to summarize it all in one line, AI is not going to ask you why.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
If you say, oh, do this, it won't be like, but why do you want to do that?
Yeah. And it's not going to ask you 5 times like I do.
No, AI, even with Salesforce's advancements and all, whatever outside of Salesforce in terms of ChatGPT or whatever, they're not going to be questioning you. Interrogating is the wrong word.
Yeah. But asking the question, digging
you.
deeper, I think is it's not going to dig deeper. And I think, guys, if you want career safety in Salesforce, AI will never be able to implement CPQ. I'm telling you right now. So if you want security in Salesforce, CPQ is the one. It's a bit of a joke, but seriously, it will never be able to implement CPQ. The depth of detail which you have to go to implement a CPQ tool is insane. In some cases, like we're about to do it at Aareon, and we're starting with a super small pilot, and I already know that's going to be tough. Anyone who knows CPQ will know it's the same thing. But yeah, I think there's always going to be tools like that where I'm sure it's the same with Marketing Cloud, Lucy. I don't have any knowledge of it, so I don't know, but I'm sure it's the same thing with like Pardot, Marketing Cloud, any of these specializations.
Not with Pardot per se.
Okay, interesting.
Engagement, but Marketing Cloud.
Yeah.
You start out with a baseline, you build your own data model, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's not like a plug and play. Whereas with Pardot, and this is similar to other tools you might come across, it's plug and play. But then when someone goes, we need to do this with it, you have to think of imaginative ways to like stretch it, if that makes sense. So it goes both ways. You either have to know how to build it up from scratch or stretch it a little bit.
And AI is never going to have that imagination, is it? AI doesn't have imagination. It just knows the basics. It knows like the fundamentals, but it doesn't have that imagination of, oh, how could we do it using different objects and different things together, different components. So I think that's also really important to highlight.
Also the build versus buy argument, AI is not going to do that either.
No, exactly. Yeah, very, very good points.
That's why Alyssa's our CPQ expert author and also RevOps expert on the blog, or should I say media site.
Yes.
Anyway, so yeah, like I'm just recapping what I said. Strategic, again, I don't like that word, but it basically means like versus the operational that goes into your day-to-day, technical, monitoring integrations, data flows, etc. Not flows, but data flowing in and out of the system.
Yeah.
Flows flowing. Sometimes having to say no.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's something that a lot of people especially when you have imposter syndrome, are a little bit scared to say no to people. But it is so important to say no sometimes, because there's not always a need to do something in Salesforce, for example. Not everything belongs in Salesforce. I know people will tell you if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. And I'll be controversial. I'll say sometimes there are things that simply don't belong in Salesforce. There are processes that are that have too many exceptions in them to put into Salesforce. Salesforce doesn't do well with exception paths. It does well with, fairly like straightforward and, strict-ish processes that you should be following all the time. So sometimes you should say no, and sometimes you can say, well, we can build something, but it's going to be really simple. It will fulfill the need, but it's not going to be, heavily automated, because there's simply too many exceptions in your process right now. Once you've simplified it, come back to me and I'll build it in Salesforce for you. So I would say, yeah, don't be afraid to say no, but have a reason why and make sure you back it up.
Yeah, I think, throughout my consulting time and even to this day at SFB, I just go, what's the baseline?
Yeah.
Like, if you go, okay, I want to sell an advert,
Yeah.
an advert on our website that we sell to
Yeah.
ISVs. What's the baseline? If there's exceptions, we build, we then go from there. But we can't just treat these two things like two separate things, because we need to have some sort of baseline to then branch off. I know that's a bad example.
It's the 80/20 rule, isn't it, Lucy? It's that you build
Yeah.
for the 80% and you have 20% exceptions that you have to handle manually, and that's okay.
But even, when I was consulting, I would go like, I think in my head, I think this is an edge case. I think this is really something
Yeah.
that someone's trying to push for their own agenda, or
Yeah.
someone that thinks I need this. And it's like, it's going to, go off on the main process. It's just not going to work.
Yep.
So recognizing it, when you have some years of experience, it is a gut feeling that you're like, it's an edge case.
And I think as well, asking for data to back up those, those edge cases, to say, well, how many times does this actually happen, in a year? And if they say, oh, it actually only happens 5 times in a year, you don't need to build that into Salesforce. Build something that, again, that is simple, that will maybe meet their needs, but it's more manual. But don't feel like you need to build something that only occurs, 5 out of every 1,000 situations, because you're not doing anyone any favors. And you're certainly not doing yourself any favors, because you're basically just creating technical debt.
I was about to say technical debt.
So always ask the question, how often does this really occur? And if the answer is, a lot, then work with them to maybe try and simplify their process before it goes into Salesforce as well.
Absolutely. Just even getting something visual. I'm a very visual person.
Oh, yes. Flow charts. Love it. Lucid chart.
I have so many lucid charts that
Yeah.
People in the company call it Lucy chart. So I'm just like, yes, I spent
a good process flow.
Anyway, there's also other questions to ask yourself before you implement a new feature. With free releases every year, there's oftentimes, I wouldn't say pressure, but maybe we subconsciously put pressure on ourselves to go like, oh, I need to, check up on the latest thing, which is good, right? Because there might be something that can enhance what you're doing.
Your end user's day-to-day role. Yeah.
Or even, with all the flow enhancements. But at the same time, if someone comes to you and says, I want this, what do you ask yourself? I mean, from my experience talking about account engagement, formerly Pardot, the tool went through a really quick progression, so that there were a lot of like prerequisites, or like, you have to implement this feature because we will be bringing out other features. So there were a lot of considerations, a lot of change management as well. So that's when I wrote that article. Furthermore, I, honed in my skills about requirement gathering as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, requirement gathering is such an underrated skill. But every person who works in Salesforce should have a level of requirements gathering, or at least have a baseline knowledge of it, because it's used in every sort of facet of your role, no matter what. If you're an admin, you're a developer, you should be able to gather requirements from people in an effective way and document them, even if you pass them over to somebody else for like sort of solutioning or whatever. But documenting your requirements is so, so important.
Absolutely. In our company, for example, we will work off a scoping document where we go very granular into each thing that we're doing, but then we'll have a more high level version for people to understand. If they want to dig deeper, they can go back to the scoping document, but we
Yeah.
don't. You need to know your audience as well. But documentation, oh my goodness, like that
Yeah.
I always, in my earlier years, underrated it,
Yeah.
but it saves you
Yeah.
so much hassle in the long term.
Yeah. I know we only have 4 minutes left, and I wanna make sure we
I
get
know.
to some questions. Was there any more that we wanted to, any
Oh
more
yeah,
questions
I was
people
just,
wanted to add as well? Oh,
I saw this earlier. So Stephen Stufer, if you're interested in RevOps, he's, an amazing thought leader. He is really at the forefront in terms of like thinking about RevOps and where it's going. And I thought this was very funny.
yeah.
I'm sure, Alyssa, you can relate.
Yeah, so RevOps is, I think Justin commented in the comments talking about revenue operations, seeing it as an emerging role that continues to be defined, which is so true. Because, I mean, revenue operations, for those of you who don't know, from a very high level point of view, it's what connects sales, marketing, and customer success. And effectively, all of that is about your customer, right? From the moment you start speaking to them as a lead, or as you start marketing to them, from the moment that they actually sign a deal and become your customer. It's all about that entire process, that entire sort of life cycle. How do you keep them as a customer once they're already a customer? It goes so deep, and I'm learning so much about it. I learned about it when I was at Clary, as their revenue operations platform. And then, so that really like jump started my knowledge in RevOps. But now, being in the RevOps team myself, I'm learning so much more about it from sort of the actual at the company perspective, or within a company's perspective, in terms of how RevOps really drives growth, because it really does. It's what is going to drive growth across your most important sort of aspects of your business. So yeah, revenue operations, definitely something people can start to learn about as well, no matter what role you're in Salesforce. I think it's valuable to just learn a little bit about it, no matter
Again,
what.
yeah, again, edging into that strategic circle, right?
Absolutely,
You're
absolutely.
not just blinkered doing, you're
Yeah,
thinking. And oftentimes, as these diagrams show, most companies will just dump you, like you just will feel dumped in because
yeah,
there's siloed systems, there's different ways of doing things, different stakeholders that need managing.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, obviously this is GPT
yeah,
generated, hence why
yeah.
spelling errors. But yeah, like in a traditional business, this
Yeah.
would be the case, right?
Yeah. I think there was a couple questions just before we wrap up
Okay.
about what to present in your CV. So a couple people asked a similar question. Um, and I think it's really important to remember that you need to provide the experience for the job that you're going for. So for example, when I applied to a job now, or what I think the last job I applied for was this one that I have currently, but in my even maybe 5 years ago, I stopped putting my retail experience. It wasn't relevant to the job that I was applying for, to the industry that I'm in. I used to just put it as like, these years, but basically between previous to 2015. You can find my information on LinkedIn. Keep your CVs short and sweet. That is my biggest thing. It does not need to be multiple pages, and it should not be multiple pages because nobody will look at that. I'm not trying to be, harsh or anything like that, but nobody will look at it. Keep it short and sweet. Keep your experience relevant. Maybe talk about big projects that you worked on. Obviously, if you can't name the customer, that's totally fine, but try to keep your experience very minimal because you can talk about that more when you go to your interview. One last thing I'll say is don't be afraid to reach out on multiple channels to hiring managers. It happens all the time that people will get hundreds, thousands of applicants, but reaching out to not only the hiring manager, but other people who work at the company to understand more about the hiring process, to understand if the culture is a good fit for you before you even sort of invest your time and effort in getting a job. So that would be my recommendations when it comes to being a newbie in the Salesforce ecosystem. Balance your certifications with trying to get experience. I would say that as well. But yeah, overall, look for a company where you can maybe grow initially as well. So again, like Lucy said, you might need to take a pay cut. You might need to do a job that's a little bit maybe lower rank than your last one, but get in somewhere so that you can learn and you'll progress very quickly from that perspective.
I agree. And, speaking as someone that's been on different sides of this kind of triangle, I guess, people have reached out to me, like, how is it working at this company, like years ago?
Yeah.
And we gave them an honest answer.
Yeah.
Then I've grown the team to 26 people. A lot of it was sheer luck, just hiring the right people. But now we are, thinking a bit deeper about hiring. And one role we advertised, I had 100 applicants. And because it was in my remit, as in marketing, I had to go through all of them. And just keep it short.
Yeah.
The ones that stood out to me were the ones that just got to the point, no cheesy cliches, like don't talk in the third person. It's like, I know it's you talking, like,
Yeah. I
but
would recommend
metrics,
using a template.
metrics.
Yeah, I'd recommend using a template from Canva has so many free ones. They make it so simple to add, like, for example, your experience to one section, your certifications on one section. But if you're not sure how to get started or you're not sure how they should look, utilize some templates online. Like I said, Canva has tons of free ones. But yeah, keep it as short as you possibly can. And then sometimes even for roles that maybe were like more than 5 years ago, I would just summarize it in a couple sentences rather than having bullet point experience because your relevant experience is going to be what you've done pretty much in the last 5 years, especially if you're in tech, because things change so quickly that, for example, what I did at Apttus 10 years ago, I never really even talk about in my interviews or, when I've been getting new roles in the past couple of years, I've never even gone into those roles because my experience from them isn't necessarily relevant anymore. It's pretty much your last, I would say, less than 5 years really is going to be what's relevant in tech.
Yeah, I really hate seeing multiple bullet points and you just have to sift through the information. You don't use flowery language, like don't try to swallow
Don't get ChatGPT to write your CV.
Oh my goodness, no. But also if you want Salesforce specific resumes, we do have templates on Salesforce Ben.
Nice.
That Christine put together, and you can just copy the Google Doc template. I believe it's a Google Doc template. But yes, as you may see on the screen, we are running a salary survey. What this means, it's totally anonymous, but you can put in your details to, I believe, get entered
It's a
in.
gift card, I think, at the end. Yeah, I've done mine, so go ahead and everyone do yours.
Yeah, it's
and
the content team have been saying, oh, it takes around 10 minutes.
It takes less than 5 minutes, guys. Do the survey. It will help us with a ton of data to understand.
Exactly.
I'm only partially with Salesforce Ben, but yeah, it will help the community, I think, as well, Lucy, get a good idea especially in the UK, because I think normally the salary surveys are done out of the US a lot of the time. And so if you're in the UK, it can be, or in Europe as well, it can be very different. So it'll be very interesting to see the different sort of regional salaries.
And I know we're over time, but we did a developer salary, a couple of months ago, and what we've been able to draw from that, the number of interesting insights, we're using Tableau to, slice and dice that data. So who knows what we're going to see with this one. So yeah.
The more
Please,
data, the better.
yeah, please contribute. It'll be open for another couple of weeks, I think, but yeah, would appreciate it.
Perfect.
All right. Alyssa, thank you so much for
You're
joining me
welcome.
on
Thanks
this
for having me.
crazy, like reminiscing about a decade in the
I
Salesforce
know.
ecosystem. Back from that train you got in Windsor.
I know.
Yeah.
When I met Lucy off the train and I was like, "Hi, are you Lucy?" I didn't even know what she looked like. Literally was just turning up in Windsor, hoping that somebody was gonna collect me at the station.
I was
And all
just
the way to now, we've
yeah,
been
I
friends
was
for
just about
such
to
a
look
long
out for someone
time.
from America. And I was like,
I
hey.
know. I know. So
All right.
crazy.
Anyway, thank you all for joining. I hope that, there was something useful in this. Again, we've gone on our own paths, but there's never a dull moment in
No,
the
and I just hope that everyone can forge their own path in Salesforce, because it is really up to you. I mean, like we both said, neither of us, envisioned being where we are today. So I think it just shows that you can forge your own path in the Salesforce ecosystem. There's so many different avenues that you can take. And just it's just about, taking risks, being brave. And risks doesn't always mean risky jobs. It just means taking a risk, maybe a different role that you're not so sure about, something like that. So yeah, don't be afraid to take risks, and forge your own path.
but also don't live on autopilot. I
Yeah.
think saying taking risks, it's just about thinking, like taking stock every once in a while.
Yeah,
Yeah. Cool.
exactly. Good. Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed this session. I know we did. But thank you all for joining.
I think if they had left it another hour, we'd still be continuing.
That
So
is true.
anyway.
We can talk forever.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.